What is up, everybody? I'm Dr. Ray Gorman, joined here by my client, Tyler Kallasy. We've been working together for about 6 months now. And Tyler is running an online remote biased version of the retention programming model where most of his revenue comes from online, but he does have some in-person processes in place where he's currently at. So Tyler, and who's the dog? Who do we got there?
This is Cascade.
Tyler and Cascade, Instagram and YouTube views going through the roof as we now have a dog in the interview.
Tactical.
Yeah, always, always. But Tyler, kind of give a little background, who you are, kind of, like let them know kind of your experience, and then we'll kind of get into it.
Yeah, so I graduated physical therapy school in 2018 from upstate New York, Utica College, now known as Utica University. Played college football. When I graduated from DPT school, I had done some clinical rotations all over the country, and it kind of got this traveling bug sparked, and I started working as a traveling physical therapist
Mhm.
with my now fiance Courtney Wheeler. She's also a PT, and
Congrats, by the way.
thank you. We traveled for about 4.5 years, moved over 10 times, lived in about 6 states,
Yeah.
and worked in a variety of settings, everything from home health to standard outpatient to COVID hospital acute care settings. Immediately out of PT school, I knew that at some point the traditional, we can say, medical model in the
Yeah.
physical therapy world wasn't necessarily going to be my life 100% of the time. I knew in some way that 20 or 40 or 60% of my day to day was going to be filled with other things, if not 100% out of the network.
Yeah.
And barring the reasons, because I'm sure a lot of people understand to some degree why, I just knew I wanted to have more control over what I was doing with folks and what I was doing with my day to day. So as soon as I graduated and we moved to our first contract in Maryland, we started working out at a CrossFit gym, and I started working with folks on the side. So one-on-one private cash-based PT, and this was very infrequent, maybe one person every couple of weeks. Very low key, not really
Yeah.
structured, probably wasn't the best way to go about it, but I had my ducks in a row and I was doing it, getting some reps in. I was also starting to experiment with working with folks from a remote strength and conditioning setting, meaning I would take on clients who were anywhere in the country and develop a program for them and, train them.
And that was more fitness at that point, correct?
Yes,
More fitness biased.
it was very much so strength and
Okay.
conditioning,
Yeah.
fitness biased. So we traveled for 4.5 years. At some point, um, twice actually, I gave up completely on the strength and conditioning remote side of my life.
Mm,
Um, it was tough to fit it into my day to day working 40 hours a week. And part
right.
of that was because I wasn't efficient. It was taking me too long to do the things. And the other
Yeah.
reason was I wasn't like taking on consistently enough people for me to feel like could be a real thing.
Mm,
About 2 years ago, I decided that I was just going to go all in mentally and really
yep.
try to make it work. So, about 2 years ago, I started game planning to go part time as a traveling PT and slowly ramp up my remote side of the strength conditioning. And eventually, I got to the point where I didn't have the time to support the amount of clients I was serving remotely. And eventually I stopped taking PT clients while my fiance continued to travel, and we traveled together while I was working remotely.
What was the catalyst for you being like, I need to go part-time and put my energy into my own business? Like, what was something going on at that point?
I had spent a few months not in the remote training world,
Yeah.
and I just missed it. I missed various parts of it, helping people. I just missed that part because I loved it.
Yeah.
And I decided I was going to kind of take on a couple of people who were asking me. And when I started to take those people on, it made me remember how much I loved it and
Yeah,
how much I didn't love what I was doing day to day.
there you go. Yeah.
A buddy of mine, he started as my mentor way back, finally got on the phone with me and was like, why don't we just do this quasi together?
Yeah.
Like you can come under me. So I went under another person as a 1099, and it just gave me some structure and made me feel like I had some support to really take, like, to give it more, give it more effort.
Yeah.
Uh, but the real thing that pushed me to go full time with this was the fact that I couldn't do the things I needed to do to grow the business and serve my clients enough. So I had to be okay with making significantly less money for some time in order to like try to give myself enough time and effort to make more money. Yeah.
And after that kind of exchange happened, it probably wasn't that long before you and I kind of reconnected and started chatting again,
Yeah.
right? So what was kind of happening at that point where you were like, okay, maybe I will start engaging in this conversation and see what's up.
Yeah. It's funny. I decided I was never going to take a PT contract again. For the most part, I was planning
Sure.
on not in, I don't know, let's say February of last year. And I was living in South Carolina at that time, and you were hosting a workshop, town hall kind of thing
Yeah.
virtually.
Yeah.
And it was some tactics, I think, around maybe sales or social media or working with your clientele, whatever it may have been. And I was like, you know what? I've been following this dude in multiple phases of his career. So let me
Yeah.
see what this is about. And I was like most people when I joined the meeting, like, I know what I'm doing, but I'm just going to see if there's some little gems I can quote unquote steal and make myself and try to implement them
Sure.
for a while and make myself more effective. So I did. I really think I did. I asked some questions and then, just kept doing what I was doing.
Yeah. I remember. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
What were kind of some of the reasons why you maybe hesitated a little bit to reach out for more formal guidance, support, mentorship, coaching? Because I think a lot of people out there, there's something holding them back from doing that. And I'd love your insight on somebody who it sounds like from what you just told me, like that's exactly where you were. Like, what were some of
Yeah.
the reasons why you were, withholding that?
Yeah. I was holding back, I would say, for two or three main reasons. One was a bit of a pride thing.
Mm,
I had spent already 2 to 3 years building this from a remote perspective, building a brand, building a following, a community.
yeah.
But like most of us, I had spent 8, maybe 10 years in this world of movement, fitness, PT, whatever.
Right.
And I wanted to do it. Like I wanted to feel successful. And I thought success meant figuring it out myself. So I bought, these template like 12-week virtual things. I bought little um, how to do type packages, one-off type of things. And I thought that that was gonna do it for me because they gave me little instances of success, and that success was like falsely proving my feeling of needing to do it myself.
Hmm.
So being very mildly successful made me feel like I could just keep ramping it up, and it
Yeah.
just kind of proved this false indication that I could do it myself. And the other thing is, man, honestly, it was money. I'm no stranger to this game, right?
Yeah.
This like sales entrepreneur game, and I knew that you definitely knew what you were doing, and you were successful, and I just knew it would be an investment that at the time I just felt like I couldn't handle. Um,
Well,
uh,
go into that a little bit because I think that is maybe like the number one thing. And I used to be that way too, right? Where it's like I can't afford coaching. And now my mindset is almost like I can't afford not to have a
nah,
coach.
yeah, God, I
So
feel that way.
so explain to me kind of your rationale there of like what's going on psychologically that I think a lot of people see this as an expense because they don't really know what they're going to get, or maybe they've been burned in the past. Like, I'd love for you to kind of touch on that a little bit.
Yeah, I think when people are viewing something like this, they typically look at it from a very like product versus investment type of situation. Like
Mhm.
all right, it's probably going to be around this range of money for me a month or for a 6 month thing or a 12-month thing. And I don't know if I have the money for that, first off, but also I want to make sure it's going to be worth it from what I'm getting or from the results. And my experience, we're always running numbers when you're kind of like towards the bottom of your entrepreneurship journey. Like you always
Mhm.
kind of feel like you're scraping, especially when you leave your
Yeah.
job that was to some degree stable. Maybe you weren't making crazy money like a traveler, but you leave it. And I was making traveler money. So
Yeah.
going from that to making, $1,000, $2,000 a month for a little while, I was
Yeah.
like, there's no way I might be able to handle this.
Yeah.
So I think the biggest resistance for people is not knowing that there's like not knowing what they're gonna benefit from and feeling like there isn't a guarantee.
And the response that I always give to people is like, well, there's nothing guaranteed, right? Because I can't guarantee that you're going to do the work. So when somebody is actually hesitant on investing in coaching, there is a part of me where like that makes me hesitant on like, are you going to be able to get the ROI out of this? Are you going to go and do the things that you need to do in order to return this? Because I can't make you successful, right? Like I can give you the tools, but you've got to go experiment with them. You've got to go implement them and you've got to go put them into action. And I think a lot of times, like we get the moment money comes into the picture, we go into scarce minded nature of like, if I spend this, it's gone. Instead of if I spend this, what skills do I get? What skills do I develop? And what does this X amount of dollars per month turn into in recurring revenue and opportunity? And for you, it kind of happened to be we've 3x'd where you were at from where you started.
Yeah, and that's like so hard to see when you
Yes.
are kind of
Yes.
starting out your career, right? So I, there was a part of me that knew the investment would result in hopefully me taking in far more than I invested on a monthly basis and total if we work together for 12, 24, 36 months.
Yeah.
But when you're in that place of being very money minded because you're scared,
Yeah.
it's very hard to push that aside and allow yourself to see the potential of what you could make or do or learn, right? The
Yeah.
independence that you could gain. So there's no doubt that it took me a long time to come to terms with that. And I don't know where the turning point was when I was like, okay, I just need to do this. Um, but I think as coaches and as PTs, we try to make things seamless for folks as much as possible, like wording it differently,
Mm-hmm.
changing the perspective, making the progression slow and steady. But to like after all of that, there's still a part of it that just kind of sucks. Like investing sucks a little bit because you feel like you're losing. But you know, when you went on your own, that also sucked. When you left your job or you decided that you were going to do this entrepreneur thing, that also sucked, but it was
Yeah.
really
Yeah.
exciting. And there was a reason it was exciting because you had these perspectives or these hopeful things that were going to happen. So if you're concerned about an additional investment because you already invested by taking away income,
Yeah.
I think people need to allow themselves to view the potential exciting things that are going to come when they make that investment.
I've got two things to add on that. And I was literally thinking about this last night. I think I actually like wrote a thread on it, but like what I've found is people are so scared of the unknown. But like what started to scare me in my early days of the career was the known progression of what my life would look like if I stayed in the traditional clinic. Like that started to be more scary to me. So then it was like, well, there's this unknown, but like, is that fearful? Is that fear or is it excitement? And so now it's like I get to approach this unknown of like, well, what happens if my sales skills get better? Oh, it's scary going into a sales conversation with somebody when you're first learning that skill. But as you start to develop it, you're like, oh, wow, that's really cool. Like, I'm getting better at this. And I'm actually giving myself the ability to help people solve the problems that they need help solving. You can't do that without a sales skill. The second thing is, sometimes for me, I have so much more belief in the person that I'm work like trying to convince themselves to take the risk. Like, I have so much more belief in them in that moment than they might have in themselves. And
Yeah.
so like you see literally like all of this potential, and I'm like, I want to shake them and be like, you can do this. Like, just stop holding yourself back and believe that you can. And I promise, like, I can help you get there if you're willing to do the work.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I definitely, when we had our kind of call, right? So our call, for people who
Yeah,
obviously
it
nobody
was very
knows,
informal.
I like I had messaged you a few times within that 6 to 8 month span
Yeah.
after we had that you had
Yeah.
that virtual workshop. And it was very much so like, hey man, what do you think about this? Or hey, check this post out. How's this wording? And you were tactful and you were like, hey, I got 15 minutes. Why don't we jump on a call?
Yeah.
Um, and I've told this to 3 or 4 people who are in this world and looking for guidance. Here's the main reason I committed at that moment. The in no way, at no time during the call, were you like trying to move towards that sales part. At least I couldn't tell.
I didn't
So
even know if you were appropriate to work together at that point. You know what I
it
mean?
felt very genuine. And I think because your like conviction for this, um, this system and this style of doing what we do as movement professionals is so real that you were just like throwing advice at me and we were talking very professional to professional. And at the end of the
Yeah.
call, I was like, all right, man, just give it to me. Like, what's going on here? What are we doing next? I
Yeah.
know that's not typically how it goes, but
Yeah.
yeah, I've told a lot of people that for sure.
That's cool, man. That's a good story. That's a good story. Well, what are some of the things that you've kind of experienced in working with me over the last 6 months, that have kind of stood out to you and have really been like the lessons that you've taken and implemented back into your business, and gotten yourself into that 5 digit per month earning potential that a lot of PTs are like dying for, especially
Yeah.
like doing it themselves, versus like going into the clinic or whatnot. Like, what were some of the things that have kind of stood out to you so far?
So there's a few, and I'll say them in no particular order. Maybe my subconscious is ordering them, but the first one is patience, and we can say stillness.
Yeah.
And patience for a variety of reasons. One, when when I'm talking to a lead or someone who might be a client or someone who is a client, realizing that the changes I so badly want for them or I know will happen, or the potential commitment to working with me that may happen in the future, is a long game. And
Yep.
you know, the move that I make now may give that person the confidence in 8 months to finally say, let's do this, or it might put us in a better place to have a more productive conversation down the road. And in the same light, being patient when I'm trying to address dysfunction and impairment when I'm working and serving the clients that I'm working with. I think as physios and chiros and even coaches, we learn all these things and we want to jump right in and solve people's issues. But a
Yeah.
lot of a lot of it is one, giving them a better understanding and more clarity around the issues, and that takes time.
Hmm.
And the other thing is just realizing that one of the biggest things on our side is time. So
Yeah.
I've done a lot to put more space between the things that I say to people, putting more space between when someone says something to me and before I answer. And I think before we worked together, I was very eager to like answer their questions or provide some guidance or
Yeah.
move right to the next phase of that call. And not doing that has served me 10 times
Yeah.
over.
One of the things that stands out to me about that for you is, one of the features that we offer is like, voice messaging back and forth, and the ability to help our clients navigate situations so that we can help you reconstruct that messaging, reconstruct those habits, so that you're able to move people kind of psychologically through the appropriate phases, so that when we do get on a sales call with them, there's a higher likelihood that they understand what the problem is, understand what the solution is, and ultimately like understand who we are as a brand, as a person that's going to be able to help them.
Yeah, the real time problem resolution with you has been one of the most effective things. Our calls, our regular calls are great, and the content that
Yeah.
you have, the educational content was massive. But taking that and then like trying to apply it, sending you screenshots or sending you a voice memo and being like, what, how would I have said this differently? What's the next phase? You know, our job when we're trying to help someone feel the confidence to commit to work with us is reframing their perspective. And I think you have helped me reframe my perspective when I'm talking to individuals, and that real
Yeah.
time help has been huge. The second thing that's been super helpful for me is, I guess you could say, like having a system, a structure to help me be more efficient when I'm programming with individuals online.
Yeah.
I've been working in the strength conditioning world for, like I said, 8, maybe 10 years, and I have a degree in human movement. But when it comes to the programming side of things, there's a clear deficit in our education and our knowledge. That's just how it is.
Yeah.
And even though I had all this experience, I was trying to be too much of a PT when I was being a coach. And, working with you has allowed me to kind of remove some of that noise and feel convicted about the system that I'm using,
Mm-hmm.
so that I can just, to some degree, follow the system, make audibles when I feel is needed. But that conviction and trust in my own system has allowed me to be even more genuine and convicted during our calls
Yeah.
with potential clients and leads.
One of the most common problems that we see when people are working online in this capacity is they're spending an hour plus per week managing a client's program, and what's happening is their dollar per hour is so low that like it's not even worth it for them to do that. And so one of the things that we say is like, we can teach you to do this in like sub 12 minutes per week per client. Now, for me, I've been doing this for so long. I'm like in the 4 to 6 minute range, but like my brain is just calculating that system nonstop. But when I say that, you have to understand the efficiency mechanisms of how you make these things profitable in your business. And you can't be spending an hour per week on a client's program when they're paying you 200, 250 bucks a month, right? And that's just where most coaches kind of are.
And that was a huge ceiling for me. My
Yep.
programming efficiency was very poor, and I was maybe caring about things I didn't need to care about from a programming perspective. Um, I was just being very inefficient, and it prevented me from feeling like I had the capacity to work with and serve more people. Um,
Totally. Because it was a daunting task. You're like, how many more of these clients can
yeah,
I take on?
and it affected my efficacy, as a practitioner, because felt I was starting to feel the burnt outness that I was feeling in the regular
Right.
standard physical therapy world. And it was making me not feel motivated to get on calls with clients, not feeling motivated to program for them. I wasn't trusting my decision making as a programmer. I, was just getting increasingly stressed. And
Yeah.
it's I don't want to brag about how little I spend working, right? But I was working 40 hours a week as a standard outpatient or home health physical therapist, making
Mm-hmm.
whatever it may have been. Now I only work 4 days a week,
Mm-hmm.
and maybe of that 4 days, I'm working 30 hours total,
Mm-hmm.
right? And that time is spent making other things, writing educational content,
Sure.
creating social content. But there's just so much more freedom because of, yeah, like you said, my time per client is way less, but it's way more effective.
Yep. We talk about make more money in less time, and we don't say that as like an ego or pride thing. We say that as in like your life is meant to be more than 40 hours in a box, just doing the same thing over and over every day. And I know how that felt. You know how that felt. And so once I was able to get that freedom and now being able to share the system that can give people that freedom, like that's why we're doing this. Like I'm looking to reinvent the way that like physical therapists really are perceived, where we can actually be results providers that doesn't come at a sacrifice of time. And I just think that this avenue is really just starting to break open.
Yeah.
But it's been amazing to see, people like you kind of come in and crush it.
Yeah. Uh, so this is a good way to explain like how differently my life is than what it was 2 or 3 years ago. And I recognize my situation may be different than some
Sure.
out of network, PTs or PTs that end up working with you. But I was working, 40 hours a week and not 100% loving my job as a physical therapist. I remember thinking, I don't want to be happy when a patient cancels for the rest of my life. Like, that feeling when
Yeah.
you get a cancel and then you get upset at the front office worker for filling that gap. Like,
Yeah.
that's not a good way to live for the rest of your life. And I think people can
Yeah.
be very, very effective in the traditional PT setting. I think there are very effective PTs and clients get great service, but deep down, a lot of us know that icky feeling that you get when you're working in those settings. And
Yeah.
now, like I said, my situation may be different, but now I only take clients who, you know, are the best fit for both of us
Yeah.
and that I feel like we're going to be successful. So my life went from treating 14 patients a day, and maybe 9 of them didn't even want to be there. 3 of them only were going to be there for 3 visits, to treating less than half of that visit wise
Yeah.
per week or per month and loving every single session to the point where I lose track of time.
Yeah.
Um, it's just a vastly different feeling.
I'm glad you said that, because I have the same stance of like I worked at two, insurance-based clinics. Um, they were honestly both great clinics, man. Like I have
Yeah,
nothing bad to say about the quality of care that we delivered. Like we used techs, and guess what? Some of those techs were probably better coaches than some of the PTs out there, like because of
yeah,
how intense we train them. And like that's where I learned a lot of my skills, right? So like this isn't about insurance versus cash. It's about being able to attract the right clientele that you want to work with, and the people who value their health enough to say, like, I want to go work with this specific performance provider because going to that clinic just isn't the right fit for me. And that's totally okay. Like,
dude.
that's totally okay.
There, there's like, so we all know like the standard home exercise situation where you
Sure.
give someone a couple of things to do and you give them a very vague frequency because you don't have time to dig into how much they should do it per week and how to adjust. Or you give them a piece of paper that you have 50 copies printed out in the drawer and you make do and you can be really
Yeah.
effective with that. But there is no greater feeling than seeing a client in person and then manipulating their training program like remotely, and like you're handling their training program in the moment instead of sending them an email or
Yep.
giving them a sheet of paper, right? Like it's just such a great combination that I always knew we needed, but I never knew how to implement it.
And just to kind of, for anybody listening who's like, what is it that Tyler's talking about right there? That is the description of the retention programming model to a T, where we take somebody from an in-person assessment, we work with them maybe in person for 3 visits, 4 visits, or we start them on like a blended experience right from the start. And then we actually take over a portion of their fitness programming that we call a prescriptive exercise program. And think of that like a specific warm up and specific strength that layers on with their conditioning. That to me was always the piece where like the provider that says they want to bridge the gap from rehab to performance had typically fallen short on, because they didn't have a good mechanism to do that in person. You don't have the volume of touch points that you need to build meaningful volume week over week, track the data, interpret the data, and implement those changes. And so you hit the nail on the head right there.
Yeah. I have two clients that recently transitioned to prescriptive exercise programs, so remote programs. Either they've completely transitioned and we don't see each other anymore, or I am seeing them once a month right now. And those same people in the traditional setting, I would have been trying to push them and hold on to them to see them 2 to 3 times a week so that I can at least give them the frequency
Yeah.
of isometrics and eccentrics and loading that I felt like they needed to get better. And yeah, maybe that's not going to work for everybody, but this one guy had a chronic ACL tear from 7, 8 years ago. Jiu-jitsu guy, he's a skateboarder. I saw him for 6 visits in a matter of 12 weeks.
Mhm.
On the fifth or sixth visit, we transitioned to him to a prescriptive exercise program. And, he went from not strength training at all to strength training 2 to 3 days a week while he's still addressing some residual impairments and, you know, um, kicking butt in jujitsu and
Yeah.
skateboarding really well. And I think had we not transitioned to the prescriptive exercise program, he would have kind of fallen short where
Yep.
he's ready to do all those things, but he doesn't necessarily have the capacity to do them as intensely or frequently as he wants to, and he would have ended up maybe potentially getting injured again. But right now we keep pushing the
Yeah.
strength, the mobility, the stability, so that he can just like stick to that stuff.
There was nothing that put me more out of alignment when I was practicing in my cash clinic than like knowing the person in front of me just had either a volume workload management issue or like a tendon health issue with no real like range of motion restrictions. Cause I'm like, all I need to do is manage and manipulate your program or write, some HSR work for you and send you on your way. But like that just doesn't work economically for the business model. And it wouldn't work economically for the client to be like, okay, I just need you to come in so I can watch you do, 3 second down, 3 second up eccentric squats. And like, it just didn't make sense to me.
Yeah.
What, what's, what's something that you want to leave those who are watching with maybe a nugget of advice if you were speaking to your past self? Because I think a lot of those people are going to be in a position similar to that.
Oof. Um, I would say, if you've already jumped ship or you've already started your entrepreneur journey or you're thinking about it, one of the biggest parts of this journey being enjoyable and successful is learning to enjoy the experiments
Yeah.
and the trial and error that comes with that. So it's speaking to that unknown that we talked about earlier. You're inevitably not going to know everything is going to happen, and the sooner that you're okay with things going wrong and learning how to adapt and adjust from that, the better it's going to be. Um, if I had known, right, of course, hindsight, if I had known that I'd be taking home or my business would be making 10, 12, $14,000 in one month now, if I knew that in January, if I knew that in May the last year,
Yeah.
I would have started immediately and put it on a credit card or adjusted my lifestyle or just sucked it up.
Yeah.
But I didn't know that. And that's a tough thing to get past. But, I can tell you confidently, sure, my revenue is 3 times. I was making $5,000 a month in January. And this is my biggest month at around 13 or 14,000. Sure, that's convincing, but the contentment I feel with where I am in my life professionally and the confidence I have that I can double what I'm doing now again in a year or two
Yeah.
is undescribable. Like I can't even describe the feeling I have. And it comes from the 7 months of learning and application and back and forth that I've had with Ray. So, you know, it's easy to say, but if you're on the edge, man or woman, just get started.
Yeah, it's a lot of the things that we are perceiving as risk now, we will look back on and say, I missed that opportunity.
Mhm.
So you've got a choice. You can keep doing the thing that you're doing and keep perceiving risk that you're the way that you're perceiving it. Or you can start to say, on the other side of that risk is the opportunity that everybody talks about that I want a taste of. And maybe it's time that you get a little piece of the pie. Tyler, thank you so much, man. I think that everybody watching this is going to really enjoy it. You've shared a lot of good lessons and a lot of good insight as to where you were and the things that you had to overcome to get to where you are today. If people want to reach out, what's the best way for them to kind of get in touch with you?
Yeah, I would say I'm most consistently responding on my Instagram. So that's tylerkallasy.dpt on Instagram. I also have an email, but if you want to get to me quickly, that's a
Yeah.
good way to do it.
And I'll make sure that we put that info in the show notes. Well, Tyler, thank you. If you guys need to get a hold of me, I'm Ray Gorman. You can find me on Instagram at Ray Gorman DPT, or you can head over to engagemovement.com. You can go through one of our trainings there and you can set up a free strategy call with me. Thank you again, man. I look forward to being able to share this with everyone out there and look forward to your continued success. You're just getting started, man.
Yeah, we'll talk next week at our coaching call.
Definitely. Thank you.
All right, brother.